Hello, everybody, and welcome to the UnWokable podcast. I'm your host, Mark Owsley. Again, I have to thank everybody before I get started into today's narrative correction. Okay. I have to thank everybody for the subscribes I've been getting on YouTube. It has blown up. I appreciate that. I am now officially monetized as of yesterday. So if you want to support me, you can go watch this cast on YouTube. And that is a better way to do the chatting as well, because I can actually see who you are. But like, subscribe, hit the bell, all of those things. Share the video out from YouTube. That would be very appreciated. And that all helps me bring you the work that I'm bringing you, because it does take a lot of time to unpack all of the lies that are going on in Oklahoma media. So we're going to hit one of those today. Well, we're going to revisit this whole book banning situation, and we're going to correct the record that your mainstream media refuses to even contend with on the whole. See, the problem with media today is that it gives you things in bite-sized chunks, and it gives you things at certain times, right? So this first broke on August 22nd. So this is the day before the state superintendent election. And the first thing out of the gate was, and so this is just a little recap, the first thing out of the gate was that a teacher was fired because of a House Bill 1775 violation, which is the Oklahoma CRT bill. Okay, and I've done 2 videos on this already. So I would encourage you to go back if you want the full context of what, excuse me, it's just a one-man show here. So I have to put it all together. But if you go back and visit my first 2 videos, I give you the breakdown of what happened from the beginning, from August 22nd, and the distortions and the conflation with 1775 and the book banning. But I'm going to give you some more information. And today, here's the big treat. I'm going to show you the entire interview that was done with this teacher. And I encourage you to stay to watch this interview. And I'm going to break down what this teacher's doing, and most importantly, what Wendy, the reporter, is doing to help her do it, and how gleefully she helps her do it, because this is what happened. This is the biggest story that she's ever seen. She got 10,000 retweets on Twitter for tweeting a lie. CNN picked it up. The Huffington Post picked it up. The Washington Post picked it up. All under a complete fabrication. A verifiable fabrication. And they lay all of the blame at the feet of the Republicans for the book banning. But I'm going to show you where that actually lies. And rightfully so. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But first, this is the most recent story. This came out yesterday. It is about parents speaking out against book banning treatment of former Norman teacher. So let's correct the record and just understand that the teacher was not fired. The teacher was not placed on leave. She was not otherwise suspended. She chose to resign. Here's the other context. She did this on the first day of school. What did she do? She shared a link to books that, by order of the current state superintendent of public education, Democrat governor candidate, Joy Hoffmeister, ordered out of the classrooms. Now, she only did that because Ryan Walters was like, hey, why are these books in the classrooms? Why are these books that show sexual acts between underage kids, between minors, depicted in picture form in school libraries? And here's the other part. This is the other part they're conflating. They're conflating classroom libraries and school libraries. These books were in school libraries, right? Like the actual institution's libraries. And now, but this story is about a teacher's classroom library. So that's another thing that they're conflating. And they do this because they give you things in small bite-sized segments, right? Because they think you're too stupid to be able to hold your attention and understand the full story. This is why legacy media is a weapon for the left, because they can give you things just little by slowly and paint it one direction, because they know that you parents out there are working for your kids. You're working to support your kids. You got things to do. You're taking your kids to, soccer games and getting them ready for school and all the things that parents in Oklahoma do every day. But that's why I encourage you to keep subscribe to my show and listen to it as you go. I'm going to put all this up on Spotify. It's going to be on Apple Podcasts. Put it up as you go and listen to the full story, because it's a strange situation that's happening here. I can feel a narrative shift. I can feel a narrative shift in the ether. Even from the Republican side right now, it's probably because they're gearing up for the election, but these education issues, I think, are going to take a back seat, and I'm not sure why, other than some people may think it's not their strength, or they don't want to focus on it because they want to focus on education later. But there's no more important issue than this issue. And it's imperative that you do not get tricked. All of this, and this is the last thing I'll say before I go to the clip here, but all of this got implanted into your schools through manufactured outrage incidents, okay? And it was done because the media would give you snippets of information at peak times and give you the full story at later times when they knew most people weren't watching. See, all they need is a majority of the audience to sway the narrative, right? So that's why it's incumbent upon you, especially parents right now, even though you're doing all those things every day, even though you're doing the things that prevent you from taking in all this information. But when it comes to education, you got to go dig for it. Listen to it on your off time. Make sure you know what's going on. And I think my podcast and my YouTube channel is a great way to do that. So I have to say that because I'm going to give it to you. So here, this is the most recent story. I'm just going to play it. I'm going to interject where the falsehoods lie as they go on. And here's the thing. They're pitting parents against parents here. So this is in response, if you go back to my last video about the subject, there was a parent that came out that was very upset. She made a 1775 violation, not realizing, because she had misunderstood too, that the porn books in school, the genderqueer and flamer and those kinds of books in school had something to do with 1775, but they didn't. They're not governed under 1775, under the Oklahoma CRT bill. But the left grabbed a hold of that. And first of all, let me say this to Lainey, the mother who came out. Thank you for being courageous. I know that you're probably getting a bunch of crap from the left and from other parents on this, which is what this video is about. Okay. But thank you for standing strong. Thank you for doing what's right for your kids. Everyone, never submit a CRT violation report to a school. Take it directly to the State Board of Education. Okay? Take it directly to the State Board of Education. Okay? But here we go. Here's the news story coming out of Fox 25. And let's see here.
Parents in Norman are speaking out tonight against book banning and how a former high school teacher was treated.
Summer Boimier recently resigned after sharing a QR code in class that led to a Brooklyn library website called Books Unbanned. Fox 25's David Chazanov joins us here in the studio. So, David, what are parents saying about this situation?
Guys, they say Norman teachers are the reason why they live in the area and send their kids to school there. And they tell me there's a lot more important things to worry about right now than books.
My concern is more about...
Okay, now here. Right now, this is a narrative flip. Okay, so to give you just a little bit of background, right after I broke my story and they were forced to do the other side of this, right? They were forced to do the other side of the story at 9 o'clock on a Friday on the first football night of the year. Okay. There was a situation where a threat was called in to Norman Public Schools. Okay. The narrative shift here is very interesting. And this is going to intersect with a couple of issues in Norman specifically that I'll bring up. But I just want to give you that context, and they're gonna continue.
About the threats of violence going on at the school.
Norman Public Schools confirms someone made a threatening phone call to the high school last Friday.
This is the second time in 2 years Norman High has had a threat of violence.
Okay, now, second time in 2 years that Norman High has had a threat of violence. I guarantee you these were the same parents that were demanding to defund the police 2 years ago, and that were decrying officers being on site at schools because, equity and stuff, right? These are the same parents. And magically, after I did my story on Thursday, right? All of a sudden the media gets stirred up. I start getting phone calls about this situation, right? There is a threat called into Norman Public Schools. Okay? Here's the thing about this. I've not heard anything since. There's not been an update by anybody since last Friday about this. The first update, or the first thing that was mentioned or tweeted out by the gentleman here doing the report, was on the day right before this aired. So, if you're out there and you're listening, you should go out and make sure that they're following up on this. Demand that they find a suspect. And if the suspect is found, that they identify them. Because, and this is just hypothetical, in order to change a narrative, you might have an activist that picks up the phone and makes a threat to make everyone scared, right? And switch the narrative, give you something else to talk about. You saw them use fear like this with another medical situation we had over the last few years, right? Anytime that anything bad was happening, they would just, whoo, fear about COVID or about, whichever. But I'm not underplaying a threat to the students. I want to make that very clear, okay? But these are the same people, I guarantee you, who were all for defund the police. I have a report coming in that the police are so understaffed that they can't put an officer at every school. So maybe, just maybe, these same parents who are now so fearful of a possible threat coming into the school should switch their position on whether we should fully fund the police. And now, because of that defund effort, Norman police cannot find people to become police officers. They don't want to. But at least they got a DEI committee, right? I mean, who cares if you can't have a police officer at every school? Got a DEI committee, equity and stuff, right? Equal outcomes because, right? But that doesn't put a police officer at every school. So you see how they've inverted it? You see how they've inverted the narrative? It's the same thing you saw with the whole thing in the FBI. Now the federal, everybody who was defund the police at the federal level is just rah-rah, sis, boom, bah for the FBI. Why? Because they went after their preferred target, right? So just keep that in your head for a moment, and we'll continue. I'm just going to back up a second, and then
Norman High has had a threat of violence, and we're talking about banning books.
But it's a topic Ashley Pennington.
Okay, now look. The threat of violence didn't come till Friday. This story broke the Monday before. Just keep that in mind. So now we're talking about banning books. Keep in mind this book banning narrative, because I've got something to show you at the end that's gonna just knock that right out of the park.
Doesn't support.
I'm really upset. My kid loves to read, and I think they should have access to whatever they want to read.
Last Friday.
Okay, they should have access to whatever they want to read. Okay, so if your kid wants a Hustler, you're gonna get it for them. If they want to read 50 Shades of Grey, you're just gonna hand that to your child. Are you going to give them, anime porn? Are you going to do that? Whatever they want to read? Because this book here genderqueer that she's holding right here. This is the mother, the courageous mother who actually came out and said something, right? Right here, this book has underage kids pictured engaging in sexual activity. What is that? What is that? Don't we have a name for that? I digress. But let me back up a second and then I'll continue.
Whatever they want to read.
Last Friday, Lainey Dixon came forward as the parent who filed a complaint to Norman Public Schools. She told me she scanned the former teacher's QR code and saw a reading event for a book called Genderqueer, which talks about exploring your gender and sexuality.
Okay, so this is the second time. This is the second time that this same reporter has negated, has not mentioned the pictures that are in this book. He described it the exact same way last time. And then watch what he does to his mom. Watch this.
She should have criminal charges against her for providing pornographic materials to children. Not only her, but anyone else that thinks that this is okay.
Norman resident Marianne Martin says she took a
Okay, so I believe a statement was made by Senator Standridge in the report that happened last week, Friday at 9 p.m., that if you had a man down the street hand your child porn, they would probably be charged, right? You know, I got a super chat. Wow, I'm not used to this, so let me hit this here. So let me see what I do. So Giorgio says, I read Genderqueer and gave it a 2-star rating on Goodreads. Why not a 1? But thanks for the super chat. I really appreciate that. Thank you. But moving into this. If you were to have a stranger or an adult give your child pornographic material, that is an obscenity. It's obscene. It's a crime, right? It is a crime. So let's move forward. Now they're going to do a big jump in logic here. Let me just back this up a second so you can get that.
That thinks that this is okay.
Norman resident Marianne Martin says she took offense to what Dixon said.
The fact that she would portray queerness as something that a teacher should be criminalized about when
Nope. Okay, so I'm going to back this up because she's saying that the fact that she would portray queerness as something that a parent should be upset about or somebody should be arrested for. Now I'm going to show you what this reporter did to this mother in the editing and the sequence of events here and why he is complicit. This is like, fiery but mostly peaceful kind of news editorializing. That's exactly what this is. But I'm going to back it up here. Okay. He says, this is the stuff you got to watch out for.
Queer, which talks about exploring your gender and sexuality.
Okay. So
She
he
should
set the
have
premise.
criminal charges against her for providing pornographic materials to children.
Okay. And she says, he says, as the authority or the reporter, okay, right? As the reporter, he lays it and he says it's about gender, and then she makes a claim. He doesn't show the fact that her claim is correct. And we continue. So he set the narrative for the parent that's coming afterward.
Not only her, but anyone else that thinks that this is okay.
Norman resident Marianne Martin says she took offense to what Dixon said.
the fact that she would portray queerness as something that a teacher should be criminalized about when she sought out that information is really quite upsetting.
She didn't seek out the information. The information was given to her child via QR code in the classroom on the first day of the fall semester of the school year. On purpose. The mother would have never gotten access to the book online that she got through her daughter had the teacher not given it to her daughter. So just keep that in mind and listen to what she says again. Keep that in mind. I know I'm being meticulous here, but this is the kind of stuff you've got to start trying to catch early and quickly. And most of the people listening to me, I know, are smarter than I am. So there's a dialectic here. And what does that mean is that they take two opposing sides and smash them against each other in an effort to scramble your mind in short periods of time, and then paint it all over with this air of moral superiority that you're supposed to pick up on emotionally, and take that as being what is correct, right?
Teacher should be criminalized about when she sought out that information is really quite upsetting.
She says one parent doesn't represent how an entire community.
Now look, they do show the pornographic material, but if you're sitting here watching this, why can't they show this on TV? Why did they have to blurb this out? This was one of the books that was in the Tulsa library. Yeah, it was. The one, right? Yeah, this is one of the books. Right? But it's a trick here that they're playing on people. This is what makes the news media propaganda. It's subtle, but they're showing this, but listen to what he's saying over the top of it. Listen to what he's saying over the top of it.
Really quite upsetting.
She says one parent doesn't represent how an entire community feels.
Now look, he changed the subject while he was showing in the editing process or on the video, right? Something from the last subject that defeated and contradicted what that parent was saying. Right? So he's now changed the subject while showing the porn that can't be shown on TV that they're advocating be available to your children in the teacher's classroom. Not even just in the school library, but in the teacher's classroom. Because remember, they are conflating both the school library and the teacher's personal library, in their classroom. Because that's where this all came back to, was that the teachers were ordered by the school district to go through each of their books individually and take out anything that might be deemed pornographic or inappropriate. Not under House Bill 7075. I mean, that was part of it, right? But not under the CRT provision. But this stems from a different order. This stems from an administrative order, right?
I want to back up our teacher.
Community feels.
Hold on. So when he switches the subject, now he's saying that one parent isn't all parents, but just and they do a clever thing here too, just in the whole setup of this.
She says one parent doesn't represent how an entire community feels.
Okay.
I want to back up our
I agree.
teachers, right? Like we need to back up our educators. And I want to see the school district back up our educators rather than throwing them under the bus like this because one parent was offended.
Okay. Guess what? Two parents don't represent the will of all the parents either, right? Two parents don't. And so because they have two parents in this that were decrying the one parent, you see what they're doing? Because they have two parents here that are decrying the will or the complaint of the other, they're saying that they have democracy on their side, right? But I venture to say, and maybe we'll do this sometime, maybe I'll get a camera and we'll go out and we'll take a random poll. And I'll go to adults and I'll show them pictures of genderqueer and say, would you like to have this in your child's classroom, given to them by their teacher? And we'll see how many of them say yes or no. Maybe. But the other thing they do here is they pit the parents against the parents. So over the course of this whole, just what is it, 2-minute long story, okay? we found one attempt to move the subject towards child safety, which is a direct response and related to the police presence at school, which these same people were all for to fund the police because, equity and inclusion, right? So they're trying to flip things on you right now. And I see a lot of Republicans running scared from this issue because they don't know how to deal with it. How you deal with it is you sit down and you say something that's longer than 2 minutes. Right? But this is the dialectic shift. And it's important to note that the media here is helping with this distortion actively. And I'm going to prove that further. I mean, I'm going to prove it out of their own mouths here in just a moment.
And again, there are multiple sides to this story, and you
yes.
can catch up on all of our coverage about this situation on our website. That's okcfox.com.
Yeah, you can catch up. Go back and catch up. And knowing that a majority, because they all have numbers, they have data on this. They know that most people don't have time. And although it may perk their interest, they're just going to listen to what they like to hear at a given point. And that's what's going to rule the day. Right? And oops. So pardon me, I've got again, this is a one-person show here. So I'm moving to my next clip. So the next part here, I will show you. We're going to dive into this teacher's. Oh, no, the next thing I want to show you is this, just to underscore who is responsible for this, for the book banning, as they call it. And remembering that the teacher neither was fired, was put on suspension, as was claimed by and this is the first thing. So this is Wendy Swires, right? Here, let me share this. And here's Wendy Swires. This is the first tweet. 9:17 p.m. This is the day before the election. Norman book ban with exclamation points. This total has over 10,000 retweets. Okay. Norman book ban. A close source tells me, unnamed, of course, an English teacher has already been removed at Norman High for providing students a QR code link to the Brooklyn Library and informing them that they are free ebooks there. This caused further fallout among teachers in the district. NPS, like many districts, is also making teachers review their classroom libraries and remove any titles that don't have 2 research articles demonstrating their value. I'd say that's a pretty good benchmark. I'm proud of Norman Public Schools for actually putting a benchmark. Seems pretty particular, doesn't it? Right? So if they don't have 2 research articles, then they don't need to be in the classroom. This does not apply to the school library, as far as I know. What she's talking about is what applies to the teachers. Teachers were given, and she goes on, teachers were given virtually no time to accomplish this, so students returned to classes with empty bookshelves. They returned to classes to empty bookshelves in the classroom. How many students do you know that read books, like real books, like tangible books? How many of you do your reading on a Kindle or a computer or a phone? How many of you remember your classroom specifically? Think back, high school, your math class having a shelf full of books. Even your English class is having a shelf full of books. Isn't that what the library is for? But especially in 2022, when most things are digital, when your kids get computers and they get, everything's on Google programs, right? This is all manufactured, I'm telling you. And they don't even subtly, it's hard to realize it, right? And then, of course, she brings up in the next tweet, now look, and that got 777 retweets. This made this woman's career. This lie that she told, that she let spread, that went to CNN and Huffington Post and Lord knows where else. The day before the state superintendent election. And by the way, the teacher who did this was for April Grace, the woke Republican candidate, it seemed. But this stuff doesn't exist. And then she goes to this next part, which is a situation that happened over the summer. I'm told it was, and then she goes on, I'm told it was sharing this resource that sparked recent action against the Norman High English teacher. Brooklyn Public Library is offering any American teen unlimited digital plus audio access to banned challenged books. So the Unbanned Books is now functioning as a porn website for kids. Because the first thing that came up when you did that, when you went to the website that day, was the genderqueer that had the pornography in it. That who ordered out of the classroom? Do you remember? Wasn't the CRT bill, and it wasn't any Republican. Now, a Republican spurned it by shaming Joy Hoffmeister, the Democratic candidate for governor, into ordering the books out of the room, or demanding it, recommending it. Update. So this is later on. She goes, I just spoke with the Norman high school English teacher. She confirms that she shared the library QR code. Immediately after I was removed from my position and placed on leave, teachers across the district have been told by administration. What? She said, teachers across the district have been told by administration to either remove or restrict student access to classroom library text for fear. See, she even, this was all contrived, and this reporter did it on purpose to get retweets. She should be fired. She should. So now, I just want to show this just to prove my point, so I can cite my source here, that it was the Democratic gubernatorial candidate for Oklahoma that's responsible for this. Look. Hoffmeister demands removal of pornographic books reportedly in Tulsa school library. See, right after this, I put out a list of these books being in the Norman school library. So what did all of the districts in the state do? They started ordering their teachers to make sure that these books were not either in the library available to kids or in the teachers' rooms available to kids. On the demands of Hoffmeister, right? And she says this is inappropriate. Sexually explicit material. It's pornography that does not belong in any public school library. So these parents that you just saw are on the record, because when she says the book that they were discussing in that story is the book that Democratic governor candidate Joy Hoffmeister said should be out. So they're blaming Republicans for something that Joy Hoffmeister ordered, but again, she only ordered it after she was shamed into it by Ryan Walters. Because it was so indefensible, she had no choice. But I guarantee you, if she had a choice, she'd be out here picketing with these parents. Because Joy Hoffmeister's the reason they're there in the first place. Joy Hoffmeister's the reason the books are there. So there's another distortion in all of this, right? Just saying. I wonder if they get, so they don't say in here that it was Ryan that spurned it, but it was. Ryan had to teach Joy Hoffmeister that porn isn't good for school kids. And these parents are backing up this teacher and how poorly she was treated. But here's the thing. We've already established that this teacher was not removed, put on leave, or any of the sort. That's what Norman Public Schools said, that they were hoping she'd be back. But she chose to resign. Why? Because she now has a career as an activist. And she did this on the first day of school. And it was all planned. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you that it was all planned in her own words. Ready? So they did a little cut of, hold on. They did a little cut for their interview. The first one, where the teacher shared her story, right? But what they forgot to mention was that there was a 20-minute uncut version of the interview. You ready for this? This is going to be good. So we're going to break this down as it goes along, but first of all, this teacher is walking proof, not just that she is a 1775 violation, because she wants to make kids feel bad, and she says that in here. She wants to not make them just feel bad, but discriminate against them actively through policy in the classroom. But there's a reason they cut this so badly. And you're also going to hear this reporter. You're going to hear this reporter gleefully in support of this false narrative. Gleefully. Get ready. So we're going to start this. I'm going to try to stop it as little as possible, but I'm going to hit you at the important parts. I know it's 20 minutes long, but stick with me. If you have to pause it and watch it again, if you have to come back and watch it, you need to watch this full interview. You need to watch this full interview because the activists are really good in little bite-sized spurts. If they start talking too long, they get themselves in bad trouble. Bad trouble. And you will see that here. Here we go.
Teaching?
So this
And how long have you been teaching?
so this would have been my 9th year in teaching as a certified classroom teacher. You know, if you include all of the other things that go into it before you get to that point, I've been in education for about a decade.
Okay, so coming into this school year, already a little worried about some of the laws in the books. Did you go into the year thinking, I'm going to challenge this?
I think, and I don't want to speak for all Oklahoma teachers, but
She didn't ask you.
I think many of us have had HB 1775 on our minds, you know, since it was introduced and signed by Governor Stitt last year. I think we've all had to kind of make our own internal calculations and cost benefit analyses, because
The question was, did you go into this knowing that you were going to do this? Did you go into the first day of school knowing you were going to hand out this QR code to your kids and that it would probably be a problem?
the legislation has forced Oklahoma educators into is, you know, essentially a catch-22 situation where, you know, we're having to choose, you know, either instructional malpractice, which is what the law would be forcing us to do. And
Under her logic, every single instructional year before CRT really made its way into public schools, which was just 2019, 2020, till they really started doing it outwardly, was educational malpractice, just for the record. So,
and our livelihoods.
When you say malpractice, like how would it force you then to not teach adequately?
So
here we go.
the issue, and I have many of them with HB 1775, it is a startlingly, astonishingly poorly written piece of legislation, and it's very clear that no educators were consulted.
Okay.
In the
First of all, there were many educators consulted, including this one, just for the record.
In the legislation itself, I think that is the purpose. If I'm being honest, it is intentionally vague because it is intended, as it's a trap. The point is to stifle.
So, again, I read this on one of my what it demands is that teachers don't discriminate against kids based upon their immutable qualities in class. And through that discrimination, make them feel that they should be guilty for something they have no responsibility for, which is the race, the color, or the sins of those who came before them that might share the same immutable qualities. Continuing.
A lot of the meaningful, productive, important conversations that should be happening in our schools around things like systemic racism, pervasive discrimination.
Okay, so the term systemic racism derives from critical theory and critical, what they call cultural theory now, but it's really critical race theory, right? Systemic discrimination means that racism is present everywhere, no matter what. It's not whether a racist act happened. It's how did it manifest. So it requires teachers and anybody in charge or anybody in the process to find the racism. Right. This is the basis when they say that, well, we're not teaching critical race theory in class. No, they're practicing it. Because critical theory has a theory and a praxis, right, component, right? Here's the ideology. This is what we want in the policies of the school. Then the administration makes the teachers at that point, right? It makes them practice it. Okay? It makes them practice it within the policies and within their classrooms. And they don't need explicit line items in the curriculum to do it. Right? So she just brought up systemic racism, which in and of itself in her classroom doesn't exist unless she's implanting it because she's the one in charge. So she's teaching about systems of power and oppression based upon people's immutable qualities that would align to the ones of her students in the classroom, and then mandating through that process that you accept your privilege or your victimhood. And that's what 1775 stops. And she's very upset about that. But this is the full interview. Listen.
The value of marginalized communities, and that should be happening in our schools around things like systemic racism, pervasive discrimination, the value of marginalized communities, and essentially what the law requires educators to do is self-censor. If we are
all teachers and adults in everything that they do in a professional setting or a public setting have to self-censor. Okay? If you have the urge at any given point to yell at somebody and you don't do it and you stop yourself from doing that, is self-censoring, right? But it's what's used to do that self-censoring that is the issue. So what she's saying is that the law has prevented her from transmuting her political ideology under the guise of English composition or English in the classroom, And again, she's an English teacher. So we're not talking history here. We're talking how to write, the parts of speech, right? Sentence structure, right? We're talking basic English is what she's supposed to be teaching. So you don't need to be teaching about systemic racism while teaching the structure of a sentence. And she's very upset that HB 7075 has disallowed her from doing that. Because when she says, here's the other part of this, marginalized communities, okay, but she's putting people into a binary. There's a marginalized communities, they're all in one group, and there's non-marginalized or oppressive communities. And this is all historic. Not today, necessarily, but historically oppressive or marginalized. So she's presenting herself physically as a non-binary person, but she's demanding that society place a binary, historically oppressive, historically marginalized.
Do is self-censor. If we are legislating feelings and intent,
you can legislate intent when it comes to an action done by somebody. That's the difference between first, second, third degree murder, homicide, right? Because you can literally, under laws of most states, you can end someone's life. And the intent behind that ending of a life can determine whether you are on death row and the state takes your life, or you go free. And everything in between that. So the very basic of what you just said, because this whole ideology is built on impact over intent. She's saying the impact of whatever it is that she's having to deal with should apply to everyone else, apply to her and everyone else, but not the intent. You can't legislate intent. Actually, yes, you can. And when it comes to sharing pornographic materials with kids, right? If you have the intent to do that, that is a crime. The intent governs that, actually. Right?
I mean, anyone could say they're uncomfortable. Personally, I think that there is value in discomfort.
There's value in discomfort, but not her discomfort. There's value in discomfort, but not her discomfort. The discomfort of her kids in the classroom. Right? She has the right to not feel the discomfort of having to censor herself. But anybody that she wishes to impose discomfort on for her political purposes, for her best practices purposes, right? They get the discomfort. This is the weaponization of empathy, right? And it means it's not reciprocated, right? Empathy only works if it's mutual. Unreciprocated empathy is manipulation.
I think that's where the learning happens. And we should be, that there is value in discomfort. I think that's where the learning happens.
The learning of their ideology.
And we should be pushing our kids to experience that to a degree.
But not her.
But what has
not the
happened
teachers.
Is it draws battle lines. And it pits educators against students, against parents and guardians.
Okay, so the implantation of this process, which did not wholly exist in the way that it does today, just think back to before COVID. I know that wiped everyone's brain, right? I get it. It seems like 80 years ago because of the lockdowns and all this, but just think back. Parents, think back to even just 2018, or those who are my age. So go back to when you were in high school or you were in college. This stuff wasn't pervasive, so much so that you had parents and teachers quitting, right? It wasn't there like this because During the 2020 lockdowns, they implanted all of this as a response to the George Floyd issue. That gave them the mandate. And these weak-kneed school districts took the poison pill and accepted the fact that they had to hire people that had this ideology in order to be equitable. Keep listening. I'm sorry, I know I keep stopping, but I'm trying to make sure you get it.
And it pits educators against students, against parents and guardians.
She did that. They did that.
Because now I am constantly having to self-censor.
Which is uncomfortable for her. See? Self-censoring is uncomfortable for her. Her identity, her politics are her identity. And so if she has to self-censor her politics in the classroom, that's uncomfortable for her. That's unacceptable. But students feeling the discomfort that she's imposing upon them, that's okay. And you're going to hear a lot more, and you heard from the parents, is we have to protect our teachers. What about the students here? That's what 1775, it's all about students. What about the students? She doesn't want to feel discomfort of having to self-censor. That's what this comes down to. And she just says it right here.
Because now I am constantly having to self-censor.
Goodness.
And
you have to be an adult.
Change what I would do in the classroom and what I know to be best practice in order to.
What she knows to be best practice. She has a master's degree in education, which is almost useless. It's where she learned to do what she's doing. But she's not an expert. She's an expert in her ideology and what she feels. Teachers are not doctors. They're not medical experts. They're not scientists. Teaching is a subjective thing, and it actually changes pupil to pupil. So she's claiming expertise she doesn't have, or a level of expertise she doesn't have in a subject matter that doesn't have the kind of expertise that she's talking about.
Or to avoid making anyone uncomfortable and what I know to be best practice in order to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. And
wait, so she
again, I don't
learning happens in discomfort, but she learned how to make anyone.
Why I'm being penalized for that. And the state board has indicated,
First of all, again, she wasn't penalized. She was neither fired, she was neither suspended, she was none of that, ever. So she wasn't penalized. So she's making that up completely. She's manufacturing her own victimhood here. Right? This is how people who might be in an oppressive class, which she's obviously a Caucasian person. So she's at the height of oppressor status. If she were male, that would put her at the tip top, but she's one rung under. So this is how she's paying her tithe, right? This is how she gets to flip the hierarchy. And now she gets to do all the interviews, right? She gets to talk to the Washington Post and CNN and Huffington Post. She'll never have to teach another day in her life. She's a paid activist from now on.
With their actions related to Tulsa Public Schools, related to Mustang Public Schools, that they're willing to play the governor's game. And in my opinion,
her situation has nothing to do with House Bill 1775, other than the parent made the complaint under those guys. That's it. So it's not the governor's game. The Democratic candidate for governor, under pressure from Ryan Walters, because it was common sense, told them to not have the books in that she shared with these kids through a QR code. And then she resigns and claims victimhood.
That is, that's foregoing their duty as, members of the state board. And, they've set themselves up in opposition to Oklahoma public schools, and districts are scared.
No, they set themselves in opposition to your political agenda being implanted on their kids. That's what they set themselves up for, which it should be. You should be teaching in a classroom subject material that has nothing to do with identity politics.
The law has done exactly what it was intended to do.
I know in your statements before, you placed the blame squarely on the legislature, on the governor. You didn't blame the district. Were their hands, as you see it, kind of tied in this, or do districts need to do more to protect their teachers?
And that's a great question. And I mean, any indication, I think it is an indication of where we are and the dire straits our public school systems are in Oklahoma. Now that we're even having to ask those questions, I don't absolve Norman Public Schools from any blame. I do think that, you know, there was a lack of communication. There's a pattern of knee-jerk reactions and some questions, and I think some valid questions, you know, from faculty and from staff about how much district administration, you know, actually trusts and attempts to protect its teachers. But I do also acknowledge that, you know, they are like any other district in Oklahoma right now. They're between a rock and a hard place. You know, as far as what, you know, teachers in my previous district were told related to, you know, censorship and classroom libraries and that conversation. We were all reeling, including, you know, site administration.
They were all reeling.
Administration. And again, one of the sticking points that, you know, many folks have, myself included, when it comes to HB 1775 is it's wildly unclear. Again, you can't legislate feelings, which is why it's unclear. And that has created an environment of self-censorship and an environment of fear and much less openness in our public schools. Because
we don't want the openness that involves you sharing. We don't want that kind of sharing those kind of materials with those kids. Parents don't want that. Your state superintendent, Joy Hoffmeister, the Democratic candidate for governor, didn't want that because Ryan Walters made her not want it, right? Made her admit that that was wrong. Amazing.
Because now, you know, district leadership, you know, site leadership, individual teachers are having to, you know, try and infer, you know, what people are going to feel. Is something going to be misinterpreted?
That's not what you signed up for.
Right. And there are folks out there.
You see how she's on her side?
Who are looking for an excuse. And so it really creates an impossible dynamic. And, you know, Norman Public Schools and every...
It's not an impossible dynamic not to share links to books that had pornographic images in them that the school told you not to have and give to kids in the classroom. That's not an impossible dynamic. Most of all teachers do that all the time. They just don't share that stuff with their kids. They don't share that stuff with their students. That's it.
School district in the state is in a difficult position. How do we protect our teachers while following an impossible to follow law?
It's not about protecting your teachers. Your students are the important part. So she wants to protect teachers at the expense of the students so the students can feel discomfort. Right? This is tantamount to keeping everyone inside because the older people, right, might be under harm's way. So you're going to limit everything for everyone else. We've inverted the responsibility here. We've inverted that responsibility. The teachers should be the ones protecting the students and not worried about themselves. But that's all this is. She's only worried about herself.
It's crappy for everybody on every
Yes.
level. Then, talk me through.
So,
An impossible to
listen to
follow law.
listen to the reporter.
It's crappy for everybody on every
Yes.
level. Then, talk me through. You chose to share this QR code. Why did you share it?
Here we go.
Well, I mean, I'm an English teacher, and you know, in my content area, and you know, in the education that I myself have received, and the research that I have participated in, and everything that I have done in education, and my colleagues, you know, have done as well. I think this state has some of the most amazing English teachers in the country, and they do not get the credit, nearly the credit they deserve. And it's time we put some respect on their names. But, you know, I understand that stories are important. Stories are a vital way that we as humans and we as a society understand ourselves and our place in that world. And stories are possibility. You know, and as the amazing education scholar Redeem Sims Bishop has said, like, stories are windows, they're mirrors, they're sliding glass doors, you know, they're prisms, they're telescopes, periscopes, you know, magic carpets, pillows, pick random objects. Stories are that.
Oh, they just any of that. Anything you want them to be, that's what stories are.
Possible. They validate one's identity and one's existence. There's a reason we read the Odyssey, you know, thousands of years later.
The Odyssey has nothing to do with your identity. It has everything to do with your journey as a person beyond your identity, actually. And I'm sorry, stories are not pillows. Stories are not toilet paper. Stories are not just any random object. What stories are to her is a way to inject her politics into everything that she teaches. That's what her stories are. But stories are not, you know, a camera, or stories are not a picture frame. They're just not. Stories are stories, and you can use them to teach people things. But what she's talking about is implanting an ideology, the same story in every story. That's the thing about this. She wants every story to have the same ending. She wants every story to have the same moral. And that's much easier if you can bring in, under the guise of identity, people who write new books that all have the same moral. And she's going to get to that.
Because it has some fundamental truths about the human experience that resonate, you know, no matter when or where we are. And it's vitally important that our students, you know, to feel empowered, see themselves reflected and validated in the stories, not only that are available in the classroom, but that are part of the curriculum. And for too long, education, public education, has not included those stories. You know, I have taught in schools where, you know, when the official reading list was given to me, the most contemporary text that that students read was To Kill a Mockingbird. That was published in 1960. And there's some value to Kill a Mockingbird, absolutely. I mean, all you have to do is look at the folks who are trying to remove it from you know, school libraries and school classrooms. That's a problem. When your text doesn't reflect the lived experiences, you know, of the students who are walking into your class.
Okay, hold on. You go to school to learn things you don't know, not to have things reflected back at you. And if you're supposed to highlight marginalized communities, or you're supposed to highlight other experiences, how can you use texts that reflect what the student has already lived and their experience? That's not the purpose of education. The purpose of education is to expand, right? Not to reflect what it is that you already know. It's to expand what you know. But this is critical theory here. This is the basis of it.
Reflect the lived experiences, of the students who are walking into your classroom. And yes, there are universal themes in texts like To Kill a Mockingbird, but we have better options. We have options that can tell the same story from what I would consider a more valid point of view. If we're talking about, a story around systemic racism, I don't know that a white woman is the best person to tell that story.
And there it is. She doesn't know that a white woman is the best to tell the story, even though this white woman lived in 1950 and earlier and was actually around for Jim Crow era and lived through it and saw it and researched it and was in at the time, right? But it's the fact that the woman is white that makes her not an authority. And notice she says systemic racism. To Kill a Mockingbird is about real racism, right? It's like actual system, actual racism. Not racism you can smell in the ether because you got to find it. And I would put To Kill a Mockingbird up against Ibram Kendi anything. Anything in terms of actual accuracy of what was happening in the time. The person, regardless of the color of their skin, was there to see it. It's amazing.
I think Harper Lee, is an amazing author, but there are more valid, more contemporary stories out there. And we should absolutely be prioritizing those because
they have her political ideology.
Those validate the identities of our students.
They validate her identity, and she wants to imprint that upon your students.
They feel empowered in our schools.
They empower her and help her to keep the power in the ideology and spread that down to your students.
They see what's possible, and
what's possible
they go
is to
out,
do what
they
she
succeed.
says.
We all benefit.
So you're sharing the link to give them that access to those stories and those voices. Did you think for a moment this is going to cause a critical race theory complaint?
I know I've seen some comments, especially online, that I
just want to go back and grab that question.
So you were sharing the link to give them that access to those stories and those voices. Did you think for a moment?
No, she was sharing the link to give them access because the books that were banned were the ones with pornography in them. So the reporter just conflated it for her. The reporter just conflated it for her. She's not asking her about the genderqueer and flamer that have the pictures in them. She's asking her about her premise, which is that she was somehow removed, which she wasn't. She resigned for keeping books out by Black authors, which is just, it's not what happened.
This is going to cause a critical race theory complaint.
I want to make sure I get that
give
question.
Them that access to those stories and those voices. Did you think for a moment this is going to cause a critical race theory complaint?
I know I've seen some comments, especially online, that I was looking for this fight.
Wait.
And I would disagree with that partially.
I
think every educator in Oklahoma,
I would disagree with that
since the
partially
passage
because
of
really I was
1775 has understood that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If we're doing our jobs, it's a matter of when. And I am certainly not
she was looking for
the
it.
only person who has experienced fallout as a result of an HB 1775 complaint, and there will be many more if this legislation stands.
She's promising it.
So I have gone into my classroom and designed my curriculum and put together my lesson plans, with that itch in the back of my brain. This could draw a complaint. It could.
Yeah.
Do I care? No.
You're not willing to sacrifice your ideals as an educator, professional educator, to follow the law?
No, because I
Whoa.
mean, if
Listen to that. Listen to that
sacrificing
question.
things,
Listen to
if
that
we're
question.
going ahead, you know, this could drop.
Listen to this. Listen to this.
Do I care? No.
You're not willing to sacrifice your ideals as an educator, professional educator, to follow the law?
No, because
She's not willing. The question was, you're not willing to sacrifice your ideals as an educator, politics, to follow the law. No. Why would I be? That's what she says. I'm just going to play it again. Going to play it again. This is the full interview, though not the uncut version or not the cut version.
here, no.
You're not willing to sacrifice your ideals as an educator, professional educator, to follow the law?
No, because I mean, if I were sacrificing those things, if I were going against, you know, not only the training that I've had, but you know, the experiences I've had, you know, as an educator in Oklahoma public schools for the last decade.
Her training supersedes the law. Her beliefs supersede the law. That is the basis of all of critical theory, critical queer theory, critical gender theory, critical race theory, all of it. The ideology supersedes the law. And as a teacher, she's duty bound not to follow the law if it contradicts her ideology and her deeply held beliefs. Doesn't this sound like a religion? It operates as a religion. This entire movement, this identity Marxist movement, is a hack of the separation of church and state. They're implanting a moral ideology that they have to follow, that allows them, that's so moral, right? It's so moral that it supersedes the law. She just said it. I'm going to play it one more time.
If I were sacrificing those things, if I were going against, you know, not only the training that I've had, but you know, the experiences I've had, you know, as an educator in Oklahoma public schools for the last decade. I mean, those things, those experiences fly directly in the face of HB 1775. So it's a choice. It absolutely is. And I want to remind people that this is not a condemnation of, you know, the educators who are on those front lines, because I'm no longer there. There are folks who are fighting.
But that's the crux of it. I encourage you to go watch the rest of it. I don't want to bore anyone, but I had to get to that point. I wanted everybody to see the context of this full situation and what she says and how the reporter, there's one more thing that the reporter says that I've got to find.
That fight, and they are
where she talks about her
it
tweet.
Well, and I wish I had even an ounce of their courage and their fortitude. I paint in broad strokes, and I can't, you know, I can't keep my mouth shut.
Oh,
I knew that
we know.
going in, and I knew that it was a matter of time.
She knew she was going to do it.
I think that we need to be focused on how do we support, how do we protect those teachers who are maybe a little bit better at subtlety than I am.
Oh,
Well, so now you've been thrust in this.
She wants to support and protect the activist teachers that are better at doing it covertly and weren't designed from the outset to be outwardly activist teachers, right? This is what Ryan Walters, when he's talking about activist teachers, this is it. She says it in her own words that she had planned on doing it. And she's doing it, you know, thinking she's some kind of Martin Luther King-esque figure by sharing links to pornography with kids in the classroom.
Position, speaking for those educators, might not be what you expected to be doing this school year, but now that you're in it, what now? Do you go back to a classroom somewhere else? Do you take on a more advocacy role?
That's a great question. I think if I'm being honest with myself, I would love to be back in the classroom, absolutely, because that's where the change can be most effective. That's where, you know, students can be impacted, and that's, I think, what every educator, you know, signs up to do, you know, when they get that degree, when they do that student teaching. I do not feel at this point in this environment with this law on the books that it would be safe for me to go back into a classroom.
Is that why you denied the opportunity to go back to your old job?
Yeah, in part.
She denied it.
Definitely played a part because, I mean, I'll be upfront. I'll be honest about that. I am a walking HB 1775 violation.
She cut this out of the story you saw on the news.
The sticking points between myself and my previous district was I would do it again.
Oh,
in a
yeah.
heartbeat. And
You knew that.
absolutely.
No regrets.
No regrets. Would do it again. Will do it again. And therefore, I don't know that at this moment, a classroom is the right place for me, because eventually I would be leaving those students without a teacher.
I get it. Is
Yeah,
there
I
anything
get
else
it.
that I did not ask you that you want people to know? You mentioned, you know, of course, everyone jumps to conclusions. They're reading the story. Millions of people have seen my initial tweet about
Yes.
your situation.
You see that?
I mean,
You see that? Did you hear the
Of
reporter?
course, everyone jumps to conclusions. They're reading the story.
Listen to
Millions of people have seen my initial tweet about
Yes.
your situation.
that. Was a lie. The reporter's saying this. Millions of people have seen. You see how excited she got? They've seen my initial tweet about this, even though it was a fabrication. And by the point of this television interview, she knew it was a fabrication and didn't correct it. Just one more time, just cuz.
Of course, everyone jumps to conclusions. They're reading the story. Millions of people have seen my initial tweet about
Yes.
your situation. I mean, is there something that you feel like you need to express that's just being missed in all of this?
Do you have 2 hours? I think there are a couple of things.
So that's my point on all this. This is the full context, okay? This whole story from top to bottom, from the very first tweet on the 22nd to this story, to the way that they framed the parent who came out and the fact that they put it on a 9 o'clock on a Friday night, to the story yesterday and the parent's narrative against the other parent, is completely fabricated, and it's designed to fool you and make you believe that this person here is the victim of a law that has nothing to do with what she did. It's absolute. It's media malpractice. I'm telling you, the local news stations, the local papers are every bit as bad or worse than CNN, MSNBC, the worst of them that you can think of. Everything is fiery but mostly peaceful. This is a complete fabrication. And I guarantee you, this reporter is looking to eye her way up. You know, they're looking for new people at CNN. They need new correspondents. It's a complete fabrication. And they'll do this to normal people. I'm sure they'll try to do it to me and Ryan and you know, all kinds of other people. Actually, I'm pretty aware that they're watching now to do that. It's amazing what you can find out. But I'll say this. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching. I hope that you get the point. You have to verify everything you hear. This teacher is not a victim. She's not. You have to verify everything you hear. Yes, this is her words. This is her words. None of your business. Her words. She is the walking, talking reason why 1775 needed to be passed and why it needs to be strengthened. She's an activist. This is the teacher that Ryan Walters talks about. And she's right. There, over the last 3 years, especially every DEI officer like Stephanie Williams at Norman Public School, who's now the student services director, but was the head of DEI, is doing affirmative hiring action, not really even based on identity. That's just the excuse that think and teach exactly like this teacher. Because the teachers who wouldn't do that have been forced out the door. And everybody is committed to this like a faith. It cannot be questioned. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. That's systemic racism in this day, right here, today. It's a perversion, right? And it's targeting your kids. That's it. So I know this is one a little bit long, but I wanted to make sure that people saw this and saw how they blatantly lied to you. And now what they're going to do is they're going to come out. They're going to come out and they're going to attack, just like they've done with this parent. But I want you to remember something from the beginning. Demand, since they brought up the safety of your kids and used that as a cudgel and made you scared, demand that the police give you a report as to whether or not they found the person who called in a report, who called in a threat to Norman Public Schools. Do not forget that that happened. Follow up on it. You know I'm going to. And then ask every parent that is now crying about it if they supported defund the police or not. Ask them who they supported for mayor. They will flip sides on any issue if it fits their political narrative at any given point, period, no matter what, 100%. Yes, there are traveling activists. Absolutely. There are traveling activists. And that's what this teacher was. That's what she was trained to be by the schools in Oklahoma, OSU, OU. If your politicians, and I don't care what is in front of their name, R, D, doesn't matter. If they don't do something about these colleges, it's over. It's done. Because they'll infect your school choice schools too, by the way. The queer in theory and the trans theory issues are not linked to school choice. They're a separate issue. So regardless of what you think about that, and to all of the political pundits out there, all the political operators, they are two separate issues. So at a certain point, we have to actually start fixing the issue and not conjoining things together to run on. All right. Sorry. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Thank you. Like, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're watching on Facebook, go to my YouTube channel. Like and subscribe there. That's where I get the most help and support from. And I throw this out on Facebook because I know I have a good local following there. But hit the bell so you can be notified on YouTube when I'm coming on. And hold on, I'm going to try to copy this. I don't know if it'll let me. I can't. But YouTube /UnWokable. And again, I spend many, many hours doing this kind of thing. So if you ever feel it in your heart to support me, please do so. I would appreciate it, but it is not a requirement. I'm never, unlike this teacher, I never set out to be an activist, never wanted to be. Not what I wanted to do. But this has to end. This has to end. We cannot prioritize adult teachers over children who are students. We can't. And we can't let the left continue to lie to us. Thank you all very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you soon.